Hello everyone! Today I'm going to show you how I created this fallen angel headpiece. Let's start out by cutting out a ton of this wing shape from some craft foam. I'm using 3mm thick foam. You want to cut out 8 pieces, which are the largest of the wings. They're going to create sort of a base for each set. Once you've got all of those, for each of those wings you want to cut a smaller wing out that sort of lines up over the top of it, but is just slightly shorter where the feathers are. You want to cut one smaller again, that way the 3 of them can stack together and create those layered looks with the feathers. You also want to create one more of the smaller set that's going to sit behind the base bigger set that you have. So you can see I've got 4 of these wings stacked together. You're going to have 8 of those stacks. So here's mine all together. I am going to use a pencil to draw numbers on the back of them so I can number each stack from 1 to 8. That way if I end up mixing them all up together, I won't have too much trouble putting the stacks back together in the right order. Now each of these pieces, I'm actually going to run a heat gun over them just until they start to curl up at the edges. That way it's going to create a little bit of a 3D sort of shape rather than having them just a flat piece of foam. So stacking them all up together again, you can kind of see how these wings are going to take shape, and you can see that they're curling up just at the edge of those feathers, so each one is a little bit more separate. On each of these stacks, I'm going to use a piece of armature wire that's going to help hold the shape a little bit and allow me to sort of bend it into the shape that I want once it's attached to the headpiece. Now I'm going to cover this back piece with the contact adhesive, and then once that's tacky enough, I'm going to then stick that to the back of the base piece. Remember that the base piece is the biggest wing that you created with each of those stacks. On most of these wings, I've left a bit of the armature wire sticking out at the bottom of the wings. That way I can wrap it around the headband later on. With these 2 pieces of each wing stuck together, I'm going to stick the last 2 pieces of the wings on the top so that you have all 4 pieces layered together and sitting nicely. So I've got this plain metal headband that I'm going to use to attach these to, and I'm just going to pin each of the wings onto the mannequin head so I can roughly see where they're going to sit and make sure that they're not too thin or too thick and that they're all sitting nicely before I start gluing them on. Alright, I'm pretty happy with how these are sitting, so it's time to start using my trusty contact adhesive, applying some just to the base of each of the wings, and then I'm gluing that directly onto the bottom band of the headband. The top band here will be great because the wings can rest against it to help keep them upright. As well as that, I will be starting to wrap the extra armature wire that's sticking out the bottom of each one around the headband. That'll also help with some stability. The one thing I want to be careful of is when I'm wrapping the armature wire around, that the end is not sticking down into my head or anywhere where my fingers can get stuck on it, because these can be really sharp. So I try and push them behind the wings or somewhere where it can get covered with some foam. Once these are all attached to the headband, you can bend some of the wings into the shape that you like. You can see these bottom ones here, I've sort of curved them inwards towards my face just because I really like how it will frame the head. This headpiece was inspired by biblically accurate depictions of angels, so I wanted to have something that would depict as if the wheels and eyes of a biblically accurate angel have broken and twisted up into the horn shape that we think of demons today. So to create these twisted horn shapes, I'm going to use some more of my craft foam along with my trusty contact adhesive and some extra armature wire. The armature wire that I'm gluing on, I've bent up and over a few times to create a bit of a frame, and then making sure you've got plenty that sticks out the bottom of this strip so that you can wrap that around the headband as well. Now I've got 4 pieces with some of the armature wire sandwiched between each one. Each of these I'm going to cut into that horn shape, pointing at the end. That way when I twist it up, it does create that beautiful curved horn shape. Now, if there's one thing these biblical angels are known for, it's having many, many eyes. So I'm going to be cutting out a bunch of these little eye shapes from some foam as well. I've got about 14 or so that I use in the end, but you can cut more or less depending on how many you want to fit on the horns and wings. Each of these little pieces, I'm using some blue tack and sticking them down onto my table. This is so that they don't blow away when I run the heat gun over them, because that's going to give a nice curve to each of them, like a more spherical eye shape. Back to the main part of the headpiece, I want to attach these horns now. They're going to sit kind of in front of each of the wings, and I'm going to have the larger ones at the top. For these ones, it's very important to wrap that armature wire around again, just to make them extra secure. For me as well, I decided to put a tiny bit of my contact adhesive right at the base to help stick them to the wings. It's okay if these ones lean quite far forward, because it will help them stand out against the wings. Once these are well attached, feel free to bend the horns into the shape that you want. For me, I really wanted the top ones to curve towards each other a fair bit, to really sell the idea that they're a halo that's sort of broken in two. Here's how that's all sitting. You may notice as well with the bottom wings, I actually added an extra layer of feathers to them, just because these ones are bent forward, so you see a little bit more of that back section. It's time for priming and painting, and I'm going to use several layers of Plastidip. Just make sure you leave plenty of time in between each layer to dry, and then I'm going to be doing the same thing with a dark silver enamel spray paint. While those last layers dry, I'm going to cover all the eyes in a glossy red spray paint. And once those are dry, I'm coming back in with an acrylic red paint, which is just slightly lighter than the spray paint that I've used, just to create a slightly lighter portion in the center of the eyes. Once that's dry, each of these eyes is going to get painted a big black iris with a little tiny white pupil in the middle, just to make them look extra creepy. One last layer of a clear gloss spray paint, and you can see these are looking lovely and shiny. Once those are dry, I'm going to use the eyes to trace that shape again, slightly larger than the eyes, and I'm going to cut out that middle section here. This is going to form kind of like a frame for each of these eyes. Once again with my trusty contact adhesive on the edge of each of these eyes, and then stretch the frame over the top, holding it in place until it's nice and set. With all my eyes dry, I'm going to come back in with some acrylic silver paint to paint up the frames of these eyes. Finally, we're ready to attach these eyes, so I'm going to apply some contact adhesive to the back and press them into each one. I want them running up the horns and on the tips of some of the wings as well. So far this is looking great, but I want to add in some shading now to make everything really pop. I'm going to start off by applying some of my acrylic silver paint and just dry brushing it into the center of each wing, not going too close to the edge so that the edges are all slightly darker and it creates a bit more of that shading. I want to add some shading around the eyes as well, so I'm using a dark red acrylic that I've mixed together. I'm going to go all around the edges of the frame itself, blending it into the rest of the wing, and then I'm going to be using just a very thin amount around the outside of the eye itself, just within the frame here. This dark red seems to really pop against the silver, so I'm actually going to go in between each of the feathers here and just do that same red underneath to sort of create shadow between each of the layers of wings. If you're not super confident with dry brushing and you are finding that it's still got quite a stark line, you can sometimes go in with your finger and try and smudge that paint a bit. Against the spray painted base layer, this tends to work pretty well. As one last thing to prepare before I do makeup, I'm going to use a hot glue gun on some wax paper and just drag that upwards to create some teardrop shapes. Next, I'm going to spray paint this with that same dark red so it looks like tears of blood. Using wax paper means once this is dry, you can peel them off quite easily in a solid piece. Alright, it is finally time to put on some makeup. So I'm going to be just using a base layer of a pale foundation. And I'm going to use a black eyeshadow with one of my larger contouring brushes to come in underneath my cheekbones and around the sides of my head and under my jawline to create some really like stark contouring. I wanted some really severe eyebrows, so I'm doing these ones in a liquid eyeliner so I can create some sharp shapes. It's time to get the wig on and the headpiece on so I can see how it's all looking together before I do any more. I actually had a spare one of the eyes that I made, so I decided to add this one in the middle of my forehead just to add an extra eye on there. Alright, I'm ditching the headpiece for a moment so I can put in my contact lenses, add in some eyeliner around my eyes, and then come in with a black eyeshadow as well, just to make it extra dark around my eyelids. I'm going to use a slightly fluffier brush to apply a lot of red eyeshadow around my eyes, and really blend this out to give them that sort of bloodshot, creepy appearance. I'm using this same eyeshadow down either side of my nose and just on the tip. I'm also applying it to my lips. I don't want to define my lips too much, but I do want to make the overall appearance look quite bloodshot and a little bit sickly. Next, let's get some big spiky eyelashes on. Then it's time to peel off all my little blood drips, which I'm going to apply some spirit gum to the back of them before sticking each of them on my cheeks coming down from my eyes. I went with a couple underneath my forehead eye as well. Just as a few last minute touch-ups, I'm adding in a little tiny bit of red shading around the forehead eye here, and a tiny bit just to attach where the blood drips are up towards my eye as well. Once I had some lighting set up, I decided I wanted to do a creepy hand as well. So I've got these really spiky nails which I've put on, and then I'm literally just using some red hairspray on the tips of my fingers here to create this appearance. With that dark grey background, the red halo behind me, and a bit of light from the front just to pick up all those metallic highlights, I'm really happy with how this turned out, guys. I hope you liked it too. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this, please leave a like, share, comment, subscribe, all those YouTubey things. I also want to take a second to thank my Patreon supporters. Without them, I literally could not do what I do. Special shout out to my ultimate supporters on the top tier, which is Artemis, Matt, Dakota, Tim, Yuri, Jess, and Tamara. You guys are amazing. I'll see you all in the next video.